Hi, guys, and welcome back, Purpose Family, to the Purpose and Power podcast. And I am your host, Renelle Brooks. Sometimes people call me Coach Renee. And it's where faith and strategy converge to build businesses. Today, we're going to go deeper than ever, guys, into the culture that emerges when your mission, vision, and values are in complete and total alignment. As I said, this topic is very near and dear to my heart, and it's something that's important because how you run an organization is determinant of how that organization will succeed or fail. So values were the what and the why. Culture is actually how it looks in everyday life. It's the heartbeat, the unspoken norms, the atmosphere that is either going to propel you forward or hold you back. This episode will unpack culture code, why a thriving organizational culture is a non-negotiable. Guys, we've talked about this, and I don't think that we can talk about it enough. We talked about core values and those foundational elements, and the culture stems from core values, your mission, your vision. So your culture is so important. So let's get into it. What is culture? At its core, culture is the shared mindset and behavioral patterns that are adopted by everyone in your organization, your business, your purpose, and what you are standing for. So let's start that over. So what is culture? At its core, culture is the shared mindset and behavioral patterns adopted by everyone in your organization, your leaders, and also your front line as well. It's your artifacts, the visible office patterns, the logos, your practices, your meeting rhythms. It's also your values and actions. So your values and actions are going to be your shared beliefs that are lived out in the decisions that you make within your business, within your organization, within your project. It also is the underlying assumptions, things that may not be spoken out, but at the gut level, we know this is how we do things. So culture is more than just fun and games, free snacks. Sometimes organizations and companies buy lunch, and nothing is wrong with that. But culture is deeper than that. It's just not games around the office. It's a collective character. It determines how your conflict is handled, and we'll get into that. We've touched on some of these things already, but we talked about them in a sense of the core values. Now we're going to talk about how these things are carried out in the culture of your business or organization. So it's how conflict gets handled. It's how people innovate, adapt, and collaborate. And so culture springs from the core values, as we talked about deeply. We said that our core values are the code that you lead by. So culture is the execution environment for those values. It's where they are implemented and they take place. The culture is where those values get carried out. So let's take an example. If your value is radical hospitality, you'll find a culture of deep listening, warm welcomes, people first policies. If you have a value of excellence over perfection, and these were some of the values that we looked at, team members will feel safe to experiment, to learn, to iterate, rather than a culture where you have a fear of failure. So culture is living values, walking them out, implementing them in your organization or your business. And when your values are clear and practiced, culture becomes self-sustaining. And that's really the goal of what you want to get to have a self-sustaining culture. It is understood. People know what to do. They know their assignments. They know what the company or business or organization stands for, and they stay within those guidelines. But when they're vague or unpracticed, because some people can have core values, but they don't walk them out. They don't put them into practice, as we'll talk about further on down the line. The culture defaults to the loudest voice or the CEO's mood. So think about that. Have you ever been in an atmosphere where the loudest voice runs everything? Or if the CEO has a bad mood, everything goes to pot. So this is what we want to avoid. So culture drives decisions. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about this. And we're talking a lot in the framework of businesses, organizations, different companies, because it mainly focuses on them. However, any of these core values and cultures you can take into any practice that you do. So if you're working on your purpose, you can have core values that lead the culture of how you respond or how you act if you're working in a specific project. And you may have a small team of 3 to 9 people. If you have that small team, you can still implement the culture that is adaptive to the particular core values that you want to have, that you want to lead with, that you want to guide with in your organization. So looking at it from a business or a nonprofit organizational standpoint, culture can lead your hiring and your onboarding processes. So culture-led organizations recruit not just for skills, but for a cultural fit, shared mindsets, and habits. For instance, Company X screens candidates with culture interviews, saving millions in turnovers. Okay, so what happens is you get a lot more retention when you hire people that you look for that have the same ethos or desire the same ethos as your business offers. So let's take a look at Zappos, for instance. Zappos emphasizes the importance of camaraderie and a fun, positive work environment. So they hire for a fit and prioritize individuals who align with their company values. We can take a look at Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's values genuine people connections and a sense of community among their employees. So they aim to hire individuals who can foster this same sense of camaraderie and work well within their team. So when we look at the hiring and onboarding, we can see that the culture of the organization can be steep in those areas. We can also look at performance management. When a culture is clear, feedback is framed by shared values. Here we go again with our core values. So the feedback that employees are given is going to be framed by the shared value. Say, for instance, that value was teamwork. So instead of saying, you missed your numbers, aligning it with the culture and the values, the statement would be, the decision didn't reflect our value of teamwork. Like say, for example, if teamwork was one of the core values and an employee made a decision that did not line up, and because they made that decision, they lost out on some profits. It affects the innovation and risk-taking, and this is really important. A culture rooted in trust and growth empowers teams to propose bold ideas without fear. That is one of the most innovative things that you can do, is to create a culture that is rooted in trust and growth, and people feel comfortable in giving ideas. They're not mocked, they're not laughed at, they're not criticized, they're not made fun of for a specific idea they put out, because the culture does not allow that. An example is Organization Y doubled their revenue after embedding fail fast, learn faster into their weekly sprint. Now, I know I said a lot there. So it kind of touches on project management, and I'll explain it a little bit further. So this particular company doubled revenue after someone came up with a creative idea, and the idea was fail fast, learn faster. So if you make a mistake, hurry up and learn from it, get back up on your feet, and keep going. And so they incorporated that into their weekly sprint. And for those that don't know, sprint is a project management term typically used in agile project management under the Scrum guidelines. And I know I said a lot there. And for those that know, you know, I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of project management right now, but we will go there because I'm excited to go into some deeper concepts with you guys. But a sprint is a fixed length period. So there's time boxes within project management. And a sprint is typically 1 to 4 weeks. And during that time, a team works to complete a defined set of tasks within a Scrum framework. And so that defined set of tasks can belong to a bigger project. However, they work in short sprints, and that's why it's called sprints, to be able to hurry up and get the tasks done with less challenges, working on a small amount of tasks or a mediocre amount of tasks, but within a small framework, and the team is generally small as well. So that framework is typically used within agile project management. So culture can be seen in conflict resolution. This is key, guys, because culture gives you a common language. So we could say we disagree, but here's how to disagree in alignment with our code of conduct. So that overarching culture frames even the code of conduct and how you resolve conflict. What this does is prevents personal attacks and centers the conversation on shared principles. The principles being the core values, the code of conduct, the culture that the organization has already established. So you see how it's in every single area, main important areas. It also influences customer experience. Your external brand is simply the culture on parade. And I say that because your brand embodies everything that your organization stands for. Customers sense when your team's daily behaviors match the marketing promise. Conversely, they sense when it does not as well. So it affects your customer experience. It affects so many things within your organization. And these are reasons, guys, why it is non-negotiable to have a culture be shaped within your organization. And I want to give you some case studies so you don't just believe me. I'm just sitting up here talking. These are ethical, empowering cultures that have been cultivated in these different organizations. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Patagonia. And if you guys don't know, they are a brand that sells outerwear and gear for outdoor excursions. They sell a lot of different things, bags, backpacks, and all kinds of things. But their commitment is that Earth is our only home. And so they put this in practice by 1% of their sales they give to environmental groups. They have paid activism leave for their employees. And so what's the result of this? Now, I'm showing you guys how the core values in action, which is the culture of your organization, played out. So the outcome of their practices is they have an extremely high employee retention of 95% after 5 years, guys. And brand loyalty is driven by genuine alignment between values and actions. That means people will keep coming back over and over again because they see that they're actively practicing through their culture the core values that they have put in place. Another company is Ben Jerry's. We love their ice cream. They have a commitment to social justice and sustainable sourcing. And so they practice this by sourcing 100% fair trade ingredients. Also, there are public campaigns on racial equity and climate justice. So the outcome of this is strong net promoter scores, and we'll talk about what that looks like. And also high employee engagement. Their ENPS, which is Employee Network Promoter Scores, is greater than 50. They have an increased market share among their conscious consumers. They also have a high employee engagement, and they have strong network promoter scores. And that's amazing because that keeps their business aligned with their culture, keeps people coming back over and over again, and their employees are very, very much engaged. Another company is Salesforce. Their commitment is the Ohana culture. And I smile when I say that because you all know Lilo and Stitch, and they practice Ohana. So their Ohana culture is family first, equality, and philanthropy. And they practice this in the 1-to-1-to-1 model. 1% equity, 1% product, and 1% employee time donated to nonprofits. That means their employees go and donate time to nonprofit organizations. They also have inclusive hiring and a chief equality officer. So they have someone set aside to look after the equality, the employees in your organization. So what's the outcome of that? They have consistently ranked among Fortune 100 best companies to work for consistently. And they have sustained revenue growth tied to employee satisfaction. When employees are satisfied, they're going to do all they can to promote, to push forward initiatives, to do everything they can for a company that they love. So knowing all this, why would you neglect having a good culture within your organization? I don't know. But let me tell you something, the cost of that is detrimental because culture doesn't just happen when you ignore it. You really, really pay. You pay in turnover costs. Did you guys know that replacing a single employee can cost 1.5 to 2 times their annual salary? You pay for it in innovation stagnation, teams stop sharing ideas, leading to slow product cycles. You have reputational risk, culture scandals. Think about toxic teams. Toxic teams because the culture of the organization was not stewarded properly. And that can damage your brands and your brand trust. You have mission drift, and we talked about scope creep, is a similar thing. Without culture guardrails, you chase trends, but not your truth. So Gallup is a research firm, and they report that organizations with highly engaged cultures outperform peers by up to 202% on profitability and employee retention. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So when you think about it, building a healthy culture is really truly non-negotiable. The way that you can do this is by leading from the front. Leaders have to model the behaviors that you want. Your team is watching you more than they listen to what you say. It's kind of like with kids. You have to model the behavior and the actions that you want them to take. Otherwise, it's just mindless talking and endless words that don't have any weight behind it or any meaning behind it. Your values, you want to put them in practice. And you can do this with weekly shout outs for culture campaigns. So if someone in your organization embodies a value, you want to shout them out and say, hey, this is great. This person did this particular thing. That would be considered a practice that you put in place so that people see that they're getting a reward for doing what the culture embodies. You can have quarterly offsites designed to reinforce your shared beliefs. Those things work as well. You want to measure what matters. So go beyond your KPIs, guys. Go beyond the OKRs. KPIs are your key performance indicators. So you want to go just beyond the KPIs, because basically those are performance reviews or indicators that you're doing a particular job or a particular thing within the product cycle or project cycle or within your strategic plan. But you want to track your ENPs. And we talked about this earlier. ENP is an Employee Network Promoter Score, and I'm just going to explain that a little bit more. So it's a metric that gauges your employee loyalty and engagement, and it measures how likely your employees are committed to recommend your company as a good to work. And that's important, because once you get your employees talking about this is a good place to work, this is a safe place to work, they really listen to you, they value your opinion, your ideas, the culture is to share innovation and all of those things, that makes your company more valuable, because your employees now have stake in and believe in what your organization stands for. So feedback loops, that's another way to find out what's going on with your employees. And so feedback loop is a continuous cycle of communication where employees receive feedback, positive, constructive, or otherwise, from their supervisors or peers, and that then informs their actions and their behaviors, ultimately impacting their job satisfaction, their engagement, and the likelihood of staying with the company. So the feedback loops promote culture, a culture of continuous improvement, and helps to understand and address employee needs. So when you have a culture of continuous improvement, everybody working on the feedback, giving positive reinforcement and working on the behaviors that didn't quite meet that culture or value standard, it is continuously improving over and over and over again. So another thing that can help is to embed culture within your systems. Guys, we're going to talk about systems. These are things that are so important. If you do not have streamlined systems in place, you will lose customers, you will lose employees, you will waste time, you will lose revenue. When you embed culture into your system, it adds value to your job descriptions, your performance reviews, and even your budgeting practice, right? So when you look at it, we can look at budgeting practice and you can say, does this expenditure reflect our value of accountability? And so that even culture touches the finances, touches the revenue. And that's important as well. Culture embedded will also give a continuous refresh. You want to always look back and see where you can improve. So culture work is never done. You want to schedule within your organization regular culture checks, meetings to surface any blind spots that you have not seen, things that will revisit areas that you want to improve on, and just those blind spots. So we're going to take out the coaching hat, and I want you to grab a journal, or as I always say, your digital notebook. We're going to run a mini audit. So these prompts that I'm going to give you today are directed towards business and organizations. But if you have not yet discovered your culture, your core values, you can develop how you would like your culture to be by using some of these prompts. So we're going to take a cultural snapshot. I want you to write down 3 words that your team would use to describe your company culture. Take a moment and do that. Then we're going to run just a mini gap analysis. We're going to compare those words to your stated core values. So if you've written down core values before, we're going to compare what we're writing down today to those core values. So we'll start with, where do they align? If you can see alignment, great, you're doing good. But then where do they diverge? So take a moment to look at that. We're going to look at what I call the decision filter. So pick a recent organizational or company-wide decision and reflect back to see how did culture show up in that decision. So you could have had to have a budget expenditure. There could have been an issue that the organization took decision on because there was conflict that had taken place. There may have been a project or program or product decision that was made. How did culture show up in those areas? If you could redo it, how would strong culture clarity have changed the outcome? Next, I want you to identify one practice, policy, or system you'll implement in the next 30 days to reinforce a core value in your day-to-day in terms of your business or project you're working or organization. So guys, culture isn't optional. It's not optional. It's the lifeblood of your mission, your vision, and your values. Without a thriving culture, you're going to risk the turnover, you're going to risk stagnation, and you're going to risk that scope creep, that mission drift that we spoke about. But when you invest like Patagonia, like Ben Jerry's and Salesforce we talked about, you're going to unlock your innovation, your loyalty, and sustainable growth. So I just want to encourage you today, guys, start engineering the environment your people deserve. And your people being your stakeholders, your investors, your sponsors, your clients, your customers, your employees, your board members. Start engineering the environment your people deserve. So I want to thank you again. I hope this has been very, very helpful for you. Again, this is Purpose and Power Podcast with your host, Renelle Brooks. Until next time, I want to encourage you to lead with integrity, serve with passion, and cultivate a culture that is worth following. You will not regret it. Lead with purpose, guys. Walk with intention, serve with passion, and cultivate a culture worth following. All right, guys. You have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. Blessings.